One of my spiritual teachers would just say to me, just do the next right thing. If I'm super depressed
Mhm. Mhm.
and all I can do is get dressed, take the dog out, go to the store, just little things,
Mhm.
brush my teeth, just little things. There are times that I will feel like that's an accomplishment.
Mhm.
There's a phone
Mhm.
call I need to make. There's something I need to take care of, a bill I need
Mhm.
to pay. Just something that can just help me just move forward and let myself know that's all I could do today.
Yep. I have a similar mantra, which is just breathe. And it's not even get up and get out of the bed for me because my anxiety, I'm already out of the bed most of the time, but I get so caught up that I just start to paralyze myself with it. And I literally can't breathe sometimes. And so I'll just start to do this push out 4 breaths, bring in 4 breaths, hold, push out 4 breaths. And I always start with the push out because it's all trapped in here. And just the act of getting all the air out starts to calm your system down. So that helps me. I actually started, I printed business cards when I was first in my spiritual practice, 15 or so years ago. My company was going to be called Just Breathe because that's all we have to do. Like, there is no other thing that we have to do to keep on living in this world except breathe.
Hey everyone, let's start healing. I'm Adrianne Murchison, and welcome to episode 137 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. Well, I am coming to you with a special episode. This is May. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I really wanted to do an episode around mental health. So, my guest today is Stephanie Dean. She has been on Let's Start Healing a few times, and we have a really fruitful, deep conversation around mental health, anxiety, depression, trying to get from one day to the next, how we never know what someone else is going through. So I'm looking forward to sharing this conversation with you. Stephanie is going to be on my special Let's Start Healing episode, the video recording around A Course in Miracles. So when that comes out, I hope that you check that out. We'll be recording that on June 1st, and then it will come out in the weeks afterwards. Please subscribe to Let's Start Healing, like this episode. We truly do have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. So let's get to it. Let's meet Stephanie and let's start healing. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Adrienne. Great to be here.
I look very happy, don't I?
You do look very happy, especially when we're talking about other things like depression and anxiety.
Yes. That's funny that you say that. I'm gonna bring that up later. But yeah, I'm just happy. I'm happy to be on a podcast with you and that you are a returning guest. So thank
Thank
you.
you. Yes. And I'm getting more comfortable as we go, I can tell. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an introvert, but I'm getting into it.
Well, you were a natural even when you didn't think you were a natural.
Well, thank you.
In fact, my very first episode with you, I got a lot of people telling me how much they enjoyed it. And I know you
Oh,
did because I saw that on LinkedIn.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're a
Yeah.
super pro now, more than 100 episodes. It's crazy. That's
I would
awesome.
like I would like to be. So, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I really want to talk about mental health and depression and anxiety and whatever else comes up. There's so much that comes up around this. And when I asked you, I was thinking about depression, and you brought up anxiety. And then I have a lot of thoughts around that. So, let's start out with what you think about with anxiety and how you relate to that.
Hmm. Well, I
And
have,
in wisdom.
yeah. Oh, wisdom. Okay. Now we up the game. So, I have had a lifelong struggle with anxiety, but I don't know if I could always name it that way. And so you've discover some of these feelings that have been within you for your whole life. But it wasn't until we really started talking about mental health issues out loud in the last maybe decade or more that it has come to my purview. Oh, I have a lot of anxiety. And so, it shows up in different ways. It shows up like, I just can't even do this. I can't go. I don't feel like I can do this. It shows up as I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I can't go back to sleep. There's just so many different ways that it shows up. It shows up as me not being able to breathe because I'm having a little anxiety attack, it feels like a heart attack, but it also feels like short of breath and, some of those physical symptoms. And then it also shows up like I'm just paralyzed. I cannot function because I just can't do it. And a lot of that is self-induced. What you realize is that you have to talk through the things that you want to work through about those mental health issues and come to a place of just giving yourself permission to rest. So I'm going to pause there because I want to hear about your introduction in terms of how you start with depression. I mean, what does that feel like in your body?
Wow. It can feel like a variety of things. And I do want to get back to anxiety because I think about that with my mom, my late
Mm-hmm.
mom.
Mm-hmm.
But it can feel like a variety of things. When I was younger, it would feel like, and it still can, would feel like an ache in my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
But now depression can feel like, I actually call it a profound sadness
Mm-hmm.
because I remember when I was in therapy in the late 90s, early 2000s, and my therapist would tell me I wasn't depressed. And I would feel like, well, I am depressed, I so but then I
So were you getting up and walking around and doing your day and still being depressed? Or, I mean, is that maybe why the therapist thought you weren't?
yeah,
Because you
or
were
I
functioning.
present right, I present as
Mm-hmm.
normal, but I could
Mm-hmm.
be I now think it's a profound sadness
Mm-hmm.
that I would feel or can feel because last week I was having a rough time.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been times when I felt like, "Oh, I don't know how Imma get up in the morning." The
Mm-hmm.
morning comes and I don't know how I'm gonna get up out of the bed.
Mm-hmm.
What I have tried to do in recent years is to find something to help me move forward. So I might find a spiritual teacher I wanna listen to on YouTube or some music or something to help me move
Mm-hmm.
or to pray, meditate, something. But
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean I don't still feel the cloud and I don't feel sluggish or like a slug, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
where I feel like I'm just walking up a hill and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like really down on myself. But what I had read actually shortly before this podcast is depression can feel like you're not able to eat or sleep or you feel agitated. And there's a lot of other things that can
Mm-hmm.
come along with depression, like serious, deep depression.
Mm-hmm.
Some people I've heard can't get out of the bed for days. And so I haven't experienced that, but I don't think that can be minimized. People who experience what I might
Right, right.
experience.
Because some people walk around and function with depression for decades. And I've known people in my family who have done that. But also, depression. So I've had one experience with depression that I can really think of in my life that was significant. And at that time, I really couldn't get out of bed for about 3 days. I was just like, I feel sleepy. I don't have any ambition. All the stuff that I've always worried about, I just have to let it go because I can't even, but the other side of the coin for depression for me that shows up is anger. So I think anger and depression are two sides of the same coin. At least that's how I've perceived it. So I'll get really fired up and feisty when I'm feeling hopeless or despair, or just feel like I cannot, you know, see my way to the light. And I've been told by therapists that that is another form of depression. It's just a more active form.
Is that because someone is pushing your buttons or what is it
Mm-mm. It's
what
it's
that
it's
turns
more of
you?
an external, it's an external sense of despair. Like I don't feel in control and I don't feel like there's a way that I can bring this out into a better place. And so I just don't have any hope. It's a hopelessness, and so because of that, I start trying to force other people to motivate or to force the situation to change. And I just put a lot of energy into it, and so that's I think the more active side of depression is the but it's the same coin. It's just that sense of hopelessness and despair, and I just don't have any belief that this is going to get better.
Yeah. And I start telling myself stories that aren't true. And I think that's why I turn to spiritual teachers to
Mhm.
get out of my head,
Mhm.
because I'll think I'm the worst person on the planet. I have no abilities. I'll just go on and on and on. And I
Mhm.
think, we can get on a spinning wheel
Mhm.
when we're in that state.
You know, we have the ability to create a completely different reality, and that is what I think part of the emotional situation of our lives is about, is putting this spin on the id or the ego that says, "This is my stage, and I'm in the center of it, and it's not going the way I want, and therefore, I'm gonna kinda pitch a tantrum," and that's where these negative emotions come from, I feel like.
Yeah.
But
And
when
for
we start to bring it back into the connectedness of everything, we realize
Right,
that we have a place and we're not the center of the stage all the time, and that's okay, and things are gonna work out, and then you can kind of get that balance back.
right, right. When I was thinking about this podcast, I was thinking about, for me, how it has tied a lot into self-love for me.
Mhm.
How it will often be related to self-love.
Yeah.
And so it has been tied to relationships in a lot of cases for me, not 100%, but I would say 90% of the time for me in the past.
Mhm.
Definitely 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it might be tied to relationships. And I have felt suicidal, to tell you the
Mhm.
truth. I have felt, I remember one time I was so sad. This was in 2000. I was so upset, and I was on my way home and I had to stop and get gas. And I just felt there was this brick wall,
Mm.
and I just felt like I could just ram myself into the wall right now.
Oh, and that makes me so sad because you have so much to offer. I mean, you're such a light, and I just hope that when you have those times to come again, and I hope they won't, that you do see that light that you are, because that's all I think about when I think about you.
Well, thank you. I know. Thank you. And
Especially
I
when I see
think
your "Let's Start Healing." It's got this big bright light behind you. It's so pretty.
thank
You look
you. And
angelic.
you are so something. Thank you. I love you. And I think because of the work that I've done, I don't see myself in that place again.
Mhm.
But what sticks out for me, and even in that moment when I was feeling that, I was aware because I had left work. I was working in a restaurant,
Mhm.
and I was aware that nobody would know this by looking at me.
Mhm.
Nobody would know what I'm feeling right now.
Mhm.
And that's the thing, I think, that is the inspiration for wanting to do this episode, is that
Mhm.
we never know what somebody else is going through.
Mhm. You had a lot of experience with that in COVID. That was hard for you. That was a really difficult time.
It was. It was.
Yeah. The
It was.
isolation. Was it the
Yeah.
isolation? Yeah.
It was the isolation, and I was also in a new position.
Mhm.
I had a new job, I was in a new position, so there was a lot of stress around that. So the 2 together was
Mhm.
difficult. It was difficult. And still, I don't even know how I got through that, because I was going through stuff for, like, over a year. I was talking to you, and I was talking to other people, and just kept trying to move forward.
Mhm.
So, do you recall, is there a time you can share when you felt anxiety or triggered, and how you were able to move yourself out of it?
Oh, yeah. Well, like I say, I didn't even know it was called anxiety for the longest time, and I can remember now, like, you reframe your memories and go, "Oh, yeah, that was anxiety." Um, I was in elementary school and maybe even in kindergarten, maybe even kindergarten. If I felt anxiety about something, I would feel physically sick and I would just say, I cannot go to school. And a lot of it would be like I'd have an argument with my mom about something and I'd want to go to school or she'd drop me off and I'd just be feeling like, I just don't feel good about this. I've just got to, it just sort of amplified in my head. And so I would just literally make myself sick and I'd call and say, I need to come home because, the relationship wasn't right, for example. That was a different kind of anxiety. Now, and then, over time, the pressure to perform creates huge anxiety for me. So if I feel like there are unreasonable deadlines and I'm trying to meet those, even though they're unreasonable, rather than stop and negotiate and say, I can't do that, but I can do this, then, we'll agree to a more reasonable deadline. I would just take it in and say, no, I'll try to do it. I'll try to figure it out. And people would
Yeah.
say, "Oh, you're so strong. You're so capable. You can do so many things." And I'm like, "But there's a cost, and the cost is coming to my body and my anxiety and my mind." And so you put that it's similar to what you were saying. You put that appearance out that you can do it all, but you can't. And because when you can, there's still a cost that's coming back to you, and it's coming back in a physical way that's settling in your body as that overall fear that I'm not enough, can't do it all, can't meet the goals or the deadlines and be successful, let people down, all those things. So for me, a really big aha was that just this year, I decided to retire from corporate and start my own business. And the thing that I wanted the most was the agency of my own actions and time management. And just how do I manage myself? And how do I create goals that are realistic? And how do I manage my time so that I can do things that are good for me? And I thought, okay, no more anxiety. I got it. I'm going to figure this out. And I will say that it's decreased about 80%, honestly. That external trigger of trying to please people and trying to be, what people expected of me has really gone down a lot. But I still find myself setting goals that are too ambitious for the day. And then, I get myself anxious about, I'm not going to get it all done. I've got to do this. I got to do this. I can't stop until I'm done. And that's a really big mantra. And I've had to really stop and tell myself, look, there is no consequence for you not getting it all done today. You need to chill out. and and it's really become an awareness for me that this is so much internal because I thought so much of my anxiety was externally caused.
Yeah. Yeah. What you're saying, I think about too. It will be an expectation that I put on myself. It will be a goal that
Mm-hmm.
I made up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And because I try to stay connected to God, I'll say, well, God knew I wasn't going to do all of that. That's
Mm-hmm.
a list that I just
Mm-hmm.
manufactured.
Yeah.
So if I
Yeah.
fail, it's not really real that I failed because
Yeah.
it was just something I made up.
Well, and I do the same kind of I guess regimen or routine, which is I go and meditate and I'll get it all out in my journal. Say, here's all the stuff I got to do today. Either help me get this done or show me what the priorities are and what can fall away. And so I'll literally just, I do muscle testing and I'll just check the box on the things that are priorities. And I'll say, I'm going to do those. And if those get done, the day is good. And if they don't get done, somehow it wasn't meant to be because there
Right.
is enough time in the day to do everything. And you're right. I mean, you have to surrender that and turn it over.
What do you mean? Let people know what you mean when you say muscle testing.
Well, I am checking my internal body and my higher self really to say, does this resonate with me? Am I strong to this idea of getting everything done, or am I strong to the idea that I really need to get this particular thing done? So what I do is I use my fingers. A lot of people when you start doing it's called kinesiology, and you basically are testing whether you're strong or weak to a certain idea. So people can do this arm test where you stick your arm out and you can put pressure on your arm to say, am I strong? And you hold it firm. And you say, if you're weak and you're thinking about something that really makes you weak, then you can put pressure on one hand and the other hand will just completely fall. And so it just shows that your body is weak because it's not your muscles. Your muscles can be the same whether you're thinking about something strong or thinking about something weak in physical reality. But when your body starts to answer you and say, "No, I don't like this," you can test your muscles and you will physically feel like you're going weak. So I will use this with my fingers. So I'll just, because I can't stop and press my arms all the time. So I'll just put my fingers like an A-OK sign, and I put two between it. And I say, am I strong to this? Yes. Cause you can see I'm pushing away towards the outer rim of the circle, and it's strong. But then if I think about something like, I am failing at this and there's no hope for me to get out, and I'm so overwhelmed, so many people are depending on me and I cannot do it, and I can easily push those apart. So the same muscles that were strong enough to hold it before cannot do it when I'm thinking about something that really makes me weak. And so then you can apply this to a lot of different things in life. Like I applied it to my to-do list. So I say, is this important for my to-do list? Yes or no? And I'm asking my internal self or my higher self, is it important for all the best, highest and best of everybody around that I do this? So that was a long explanation. Sorry.
No, that's great because you're an energy healer. You're
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
Reiki practitioner.
Hmm.
Yeah. And something that I want to say about depression is that there's different types of depression that I'm not educated on. And one of them is it could be something biological or chemical going on in our bodies,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
separate, I think, from what we're talking about.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't have a lot to say about that except absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and it can be random things. It could be your stress and your cortisone levels can trigger it, or just you can go through, changes in hormones or just a lot of stuff. It doesn't have to be external, but certainly the chemical inducement is hard to combat because you don't know. It just comes out of out of left field sometimes and hits you.
Right. Right. And I was watching a therapist on a podcast yesterday, David Weber. He was on Sway in the Morning podcast. And one of the things he was talking about depression was if you can't get out of the bed in the morning, he was trying to make the point of you have to do things like the little things. And this is something that I have known too. And one of my spiritual teachers has told me just take the next right step.
Mm-hmm.
He basically was saying, get out of the bed, make your bed, go for a walk. Like you have
Mm-hmm.
to get out of the house and
Mm-hmm.
get out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my spiritual teachers would just say to me, just do the next right thing.
Yeah.
Just take the next
I
right
love
step.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So if I can just get dressed,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm super depressed
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and all I can do is get dressed, take the dog out, go to the store, just little things,
Mm-hmm.
brush my teeth, just little things. There are times that I will feel like that's an accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a
Mm-hmm.
phone call I need to make. There's something I need to take care of, a bill I need
Mm-hmm.
to pay. Just something that can just help me just move forward and let myself know that's all I could do today.
Yep. I have a similar mantra, which is just breathe. And it's not even get up and get out of the bed for me because my anxiety, I'm already out of the bed most of the time, but I get so caught up that I just start to paralyze myself with it. And I literally can't breathe sometimes. And so I'll just start to do this push out 4 breaths, bring in 4 breaths, hold, push out 4 breaths. And I always start with the push out because it's all trapped in here,
Yeah.
so I'll go, and just the act of getting all the air out starts to calm your system down. So that helps me. I actually started, I printed business cards when I was first in my spiritual practice, 15 or so years ago. My company was going to be called Just Breathe because that's all we have to do. Like there is no other thing that we have to do to keep on living in this world except breathe. So if you can do that, you can keep going.
That's a 1000% true. I so agree. And I think that people should just look on YouTube, something. I definitely have a breath exercise that I've mentioned before of Jazz Jones that
Mm-hmm.
I love to do that because that has helped me so much. When I'm finished with that, which is it's about the core of it is about 25 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and then it goes into a meditation and it makes such a difference. But anything, what you just described,
Mm-hmm.
anything that somebody can find on YouTube or anywhere to just help us get in touch I mean, we're literally getting in touch with what's inside of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we talk about mental health, there's so much other stuff though. I mean, it's just like depression and anxiety are two of the big ones that people think about, but there's just things like, well, for instance, I have social anxiety, as you know, and I get
Oh,
really
yeah.
hyperstimulated and hypersensitive to be around big crowds or to, go to a party, as we know, because I just feel like all the bells and whistles are coming at me and it just feels so overwhelming. And I think that's a word that I didn't really use a lot in my younger years too, overwhelm, that I have come to realize is a lot of my struggle is that I get overstimulated and overwhelmed very easily um, when I'm out in the world. So I'm an introvert, and that's part of the mental health journey is to understand, where do you have your best fit in life? And if you're not in your best fit, how can you start to move towards that? Because that creates more, stronger mental health.
Yeah, that is huge. I'm so glad you brought that up and were willing to bring that up about social anxiety because a lot of people have that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I never had what you're describing to that extreme, but I definitely used to be inhibited. And it's
Mhm,
only my job as a
mhm,
reporter that has helped me to get out of that because I've been forced to talk to people
mhm,
years and years and years to talk to strangers. And so now I'm comfortable.
mhm,
I should say I'm mostly comfortable, or if I'm not, I have the ability to
mhm,
be social. But
mhm,
that is huge,
mhm.
what you're saying. I think it's really, really big.
I think it came to the forefront a lot after COVID too, because as we started to return, out into the world after having, you struggled with depression. I struggled with no depression during that time, but I struggled with a ton of social anxiety after we started getting back out in the world. And I
Mm.
would feel very uncomfortable even going to the grocery store when there were a lot of people there, and I still do. And I felt uncomfortable going back to the office. And there was just going to
Yeah,
concerts, going to restaurants. We still don't go to restaurants very often. And that we're kind of extreme that way because we were introverted to start. But I think a lot of people have struggled with more social anxiety after COVID
I
because of
agree.
that long isolation.
I agree. I think one of the things that I would love to convey overall with my podcast is how important it is for us to be in touch with ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and in touch with, what makes us sad, what makes us anxious, what makes us happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I have never shared this with Tanya, my lifelong best friend, and at least I'm pretty sure I haven't. I have shared it with one or two people, but I remember when this was in the 90s when she was having her kids, her two oldest kids, and it wouldn't even be when she was having her kids. She might be pregnant, or it might just be that I would go visit because I was living in New York City
Mm-hmm.
and she was living in upstate New York. And I would go visit and for a weekend, and I would come back and I would be really depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because I wanted that
Mm-hmm.
family,
Mm-hmm.
not her family,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, you
I
want to have the
wanted to be
experience. Yeah.
I wanted to be
Yeah.
married, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to have a family, and no matter what, I might try to psych myself out, and I
Mm-hmm.
had to really acknowledge when I would get back home, "Okay, I'm sad, I'm
Mm-hmm.
depressed." I had
Mm-hmm.
to really process that. It used to be also when I was living in also when I was in college and when I was living in New York at first. Fridays would be really depressing for me. When I was in college, like my roommate, Nikki, who's, she's still in my life now, she'll
Mm-hmm.
be like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, Adrian, you be mean." I guess that's going to the anger you would talk
Mm-hmm.
about.
Mm-hmm.
But I would just be depressed because it's the weekend and
Mm-hmm.
I might not have no special someone to spend time with.
Mm-hmm.
And I would feel lonely. And I started feeling that way in New York also. And so to get myself out of it, I started going to mass on Fridays for
Mm-hmm.
something to do like Friday evening. And then I started writing my book. So I might have like my book to work on.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so aware of this is why I'm sad. I really
Mhm.
want a relationship. I really want to be married and start a family and all of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to be blind to that would just make it worse, you know?
I hear what you're saying, and I'm not gonna negate that because your story is your story for sure, and I understand there's something of an internal desire to procreate because that's what humans tend to do to stay on this
At that
earth.
time. At that
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
And also, I've had, as you know, some struggles with different times in my life where I felt very trapped and I didn't feel like I was able to create the happiness that I wanted because of different kinds of responsibilities. And it, at that time, I didn't understand the purpose. And now I'm still not sure I totally understand the purpose. I'm not going to lie, but I do think that we have to deal with the cards we're dealt and find our way to happiness in that place. And I haven't really perfected that, but there's so many different ways that that shows up. It shows up in, being born with the skin of a different color. It shows up with feeling like you weren't assigned the right gender when you were born. It shows up with having to be in a workplace where you just don't really feel like you fit. And I'm talking about not just a specific workplace, but all the workplaces. And so there's a lot of ways that you can not really like the hand you're dealt, but still find a way to turn towards what you are innately true to be and find happiness and peace for yourself. And I think that's part of the lesson of life, which maybe not give you any peace, but it's an unfortunate thing if you want a family and you can't have it. It's really, really sad. And yet you still find happiness and it's
Well,
available to you.
for me, certainly I always wanted to be a mom. And
Hmm.
even now, I could say I wish that, I was able to have been a mom,
Hmm.
but I don't feel a profound sadness around it.
Hmm.
But what I did come to realize, I would say maybe around 2009, 2010, that the most important thing to me, where I always thought, oh, I want to have kids, I want to be married. What I realized was what I really want is a fulfilling, committed relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
That was the number one thing in terms of
Mhm.
my personal life. I want a fulfilling, committed relationship. And yes, I want kids, and there's reasons why, I want
Mhm.
kids and all of that. But that was the thing. So I feel like healing is, a part of our purpose and journey.
Mhm.
So I have more healing to do, but I've been able to do a lot of healing
Mhm.
around what I've been talking about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wonder if you would want to talk about loss. You've lost a lot of family members in your lifetime and how that relates to mental health.
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually earlier, so I'm glad you brought that up. I think depression is definitely connected to grief.
Mhm.
And I have one of my loved ones who would disagree with this, I think, but I think that we definitely have to work through that grief process. It was different going through the loss of each of my immediate family members, but I definitely felt some of the things that come along with depression of anger and weakness. I mean, physically weak
Mhm.
when it's come to grief. There's things when my mom passed that I don't even remember in terms of like the first 6 months of after she was gone. There's a lot that I don't recall because I felt like I was just not numb, but um, in a fog of just how do I function without my mom. And then it was different with each of my brothers. And my dad, I think the loss of him, he wasn't the first loss in my greater family, but my immediate family,
Mhm.
nuclear family, he was the first one. And that was very spiritual because I felt like I had to stay connected to him. So he stayed connected to me spiritually from the beginning.
Mhm.
But it's depression, absolutely. Trying to figure things out, trying to go on without somebody else is really hard if you're close to them. That can
Yeah.
be really, really hard. And some people go into a cave. And I feel for me, it's been my spirituality has helped me so much with that because I wouldn't be able to go on.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk through the world, me is the way that I'm built. I couldn't
Hmm.
walk through the world and just say, well, they're dead,
Yeah.
like they're gone
Have
because
you
I have to be connected.
have you felt that that experience has helped you reach out and connect with other people who are suffering, who are grieving?
Yes, but people are at different points.
Hmm.
So I really just try to let them know that I care, that I'm here,
Hmm.
because I know for me with different losses, how I felt about how different people reacted. Cause you know how people don't know what to say, or you might not hear from
Hmm.
them, or
Yeah.
who's there for you when
Hmm.
somebody passes. So I just try to be present and
Hmm.
not have a agenda, which can be
Hmm.
hard because, your own wisdom or experience can, want to rise up. But I just really just try to be present. I think that's the best thing
Hmm.
you can do. What have you found? Because you've had some losses
I
recently.
have.
How have you, and that, and in addition to the loss of the loved ones,
Hmm.
it's been an overwhelming feeling for you.
Hmm. Yeah, my first real experience with grief was when I was in high school, a senior in high school. My grandfather died, and I was not really ready for it. I think the first loss that you have, you start to come to terms with mortality as an idea, and you go, "Oh, we're not going to be here forever." And so that was kind of a shock. But then, about 10 years later, I lost my uncle in a car accident, and I thought I was processing it well, but I really wasn't, and it showed up a few months later. So he died in August, and my husband and I moved to Chicago the next day. But we were packed and ready to go, and he died at 2 a.m. in a car crash on the way home from a trip, and we left at 8 and went from Georgia to Chicago. And I told my husband at that time, I said, I feel like we're driving the wrong way. And I couldn't process it that well then. Like I cried and and was grieving at that time. But then I went on to work and I was trying in a new state and a new job to make establish myself and become successful at the job. And I just was struggling. And I would go home at night after work and just boohoo. I mean, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't name it. I just knew how sad I was. And so eventually, I'd kind of moved through that. And after I felt all that all the way through, I have not felt that much sadness about the loss of someone since. And it's been surprising to me because I feel like I should be going through the grief process. But I will say that along the way, I came to understand what my belief is about what happens after we pass and leave our earthly bodies. And I have no fear about it. And I have no fear for the other person. So to grieve is only to grieve the loss of that person in my life. It's not to say I'm sad for them to not be here anymore, or I'm sad that I might not be here anymore. It's just saying we're not together anymore. And if we had that relationship complete, then I don't know that there's a lot of need to grieve about it. That's the perception that I'm coming to after going through a pretty intense cycle of losing three family members in the last quarter of the or first quarter of this year. Um, and I've been watching and waiting for my emotions to cycle through, and I know it just comes at its own time. But everybody's process is different, and it's very, very different for everybody, and it sneaks up and surprises you sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the grief, I feel like we're spirits and we're human
Hmm.
at the same time. And
Hmm.
I think the need comes from the human part of us
Hmm.
because we miss that person
Hmm.
as a human being.
Hmm.
And I had a friend, I probably told you this before, I'm sure I have, that I have a friend who she suggested when my mom died that I get a journal and
Mhm.
write to her in the journal, which I did, and which was great. And she said that the reason she was telling me was because she didn't grieve her mother when she passed. And it was
Mhm.
about 2 years later when she started to, like, grieve her. And so I
Mhm.
really feel like that grief, it doesn't go anywhere. And
Mhm.
then she started writing in a journal to her mother to help the grief come out, like, 2 years later.
Hmm.
So when my mother passed, she suggested that I get a journal, and that helped me because it helped me to feel closer to her, and it was really
Mhm.
interesting for me at the end of the 12 months, or even, like, she passed in September, even in December, to look back. Even now, to look back at my journey and just look at the pain I was in, and then just
Mhm.
the progress,
Mhm.
the process of just becoming a little more healed, a little more healed.
Mhm.
It's important.
I tell you what, these are tough topics. They're heavy and they're deep and complex.
They
And
are.
what strikes me is that the way people show up in the world has all of that in the background behind them that you can't see at the surface. And so when people bring you the stuff, you just have to imagine that they're probably carrying a lot behind them that you can't see, and that, it's a place
Yeah.
for compassion.
Yeah. I mean, I have 3 people in my life right now that are going through things, and they're 3 separate things, and they're real. I mean,
Mhm.
it's real stuff
Mhm.
that they're going through. And we truly don't know what somebody's going through. And I was thinking about how when my brother Jeff passed and I was in Houston, that's where he was. And when I was flying out, Atlanta was having an ice storm or something. I'm trying to remember. It was like around Snowmageddon.
Mhm.
When Snowmageddon happened,
Mhm.
but then Charlotte actually was having an issue. So it
Hmm.
was hard to get flights. And so I was
Mhm.
trying to, and actually I was thinking about posting something about American Airlines because they've been in the news um for how they are.
Mhm.
And anyway, the person, the reservation agent at the desk was horrible. I have like no words to say how horrible this person was.
Mm.
I had made a reservation, like on the phone. I get to the airport. The reservation isn't valid. She was horrible. She didn't care, about what I had, been experiencing. And I mean, I had been like at his bedside for not only me, but my niece and my nephew had been there. My brother had been there, his wife, for 5 days,
Mhm.
and, it was surreal, the loss, right?
Mhm.
And this person was absolutely horrible. And so then I can't fly out that day. I get a flight for the next day. And when I go to the airport, I don't know if I'm going to see her, or somebody else. I'm not positive that this reservation is real because the previous one wasn't real. And so, she was off and somebody helped me. And when I told them, I didn't go into detail or anything. I just said her name. I said, she was bad. And that day happened to be Valentine's Day.
Oh,
And not that that matters, but
just one more thing.
she was off. And that the reservation agent who helped me was just trying to say like, "Oh, no, no, she's a wonderful person, and, like, I just must really be mistaken." And, that person did get me on a flight,
Mhm.
but I thought that was just such an example, the original person, of how you just never know
Mhm.
somebody is going through. And she was a horrible human being that day. I don't know how
Mhm.
she was overall, but she was horrible, and
Wow.
you just never know. Like I never know.
Mhm.
I speak for myself as well.
Yeah.
So I try to be kind because we just don't know what a kind word
Mhm.
can do
Can
to.
shift. Yeah,
Yeah,
can
and how
shift.
that can help someone.
I would love to talk about how do we shift a perspective, because you have these mental health issues. And if you're in depression, if you're in anxiety, if you're in anything, any other kind of agita, you may not be able to see the other person's perspective. And so then you're reacting to what you think is the other person's behavior from the lens of your own perspective, which is probably clouded a little bit with some of that mental health, trauma. And so there's a couple things, and I think you and I have talked, I know you and I have talked about this before, but I can't remember if it came from the Course in Miracles or not, so you can correct me. But I have a practice of asking for a meeting of the higher selves of the people involved. So my higher self and the other person's higher self, and say, can we have a holy minute to have a meeting of our higher selves and to talk about and work out this situation from above, so that when we're down here in the weeds and we think all we can see is what's in front of us and we're sure we're right, but then the people up above, our higher selves, can see the whole situation from the stars. In my mind, this is my visual in my mind. Then they can see all the factors that are involved and they can work things out. And then they send it back to us and say, shift your perspective. You're off base on this. And that to me has been very successful, at least in my mind, to shift my perspective. And I even think that when I ask for that in prayer, that the other person can shift also, and that's where miracles can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I say a prayer similar to that almost every day. And usually it is between me, I'll do it for me and another person, but I will often say that for me and anybody that I encounter to
Mm-hmm.
have a holy instant with that
Mm-hmm.
person, and
Mm-hmm.
it does make a difference. There's no question
Mm-hmm.
that that makes a difference because we
Mm-hmm.
show up different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we have a vibration
Mm-hmm.
that transcends. So there's
And
yeah.
we create a space for love to exist. Whether they want to show up that way or not, we create that space, and then it's their choice. And we also don't have to take whatever they're giving us, in terms of the vibration being
Yeah.
not so positive. We can just
Yeah.
say, okay, well, I'm sorry that you're having a rough day. I'm going to choose to continue to have a good day and offer you the same. I'm going to offer you the chance to have a good day, regardless of how you show up. And
Yeah. And
yeah.
have you ever heard this is bringing up this book to me. Have you ever heard of that book, My Stroke of Insight?
Mm-mm.
Like the 90s, this person, um, I think she was like a scientist. I could be making that part up, but she was on Oprah. She had a stroke and she was talking about what happened with her, and
Mm-hmm.
she called it My Stroke of Insight.
Hmm.
And, her experience in having the stroke, she was alone, and how she was able to try to figure out numbers and things to call someone.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she was in the hospital, I want to say her mother was sort of like her guardian, her
Mm-hmm.
guard,
Mm-hmm.
because she couldn't speak, and or her protector, let's say that.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of it was that I got out of it was that we are responsible for the energy that we bring to other people. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody might come into her hospital room, and her mother, if that's who it was, would sense like, no, this is not cool,
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and be her protector.
Mm-hmm.
And but the point was, we're responsible for the energy that we bring to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And to just walk in there haphazardly, or to have a self-centered state of mind and not care about the other person, no matter how right we think we are,
Yep.
it doesn't work. It's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't benefit us in the long run. We have a responsibility and an accountability to show up as best we can.
Yep. And we're not responsible for the actions of others. We're only responsible for ourselves. But we can set boundaries with others so that they
Yeah.
don't continue to, you know, behave in a way that harms us mentally and emotionally and physically.
Right.
So the challenge is, how do we, we go into these relationships, and I have people, a lot of friends and family and different people will call and say, I'm having this problem and I need to just understand how to work it out. And it's not that I work it out, it's that I ask angels and we have conversations about, in prayer about that. And the question is, how do we stop them from doing this to me? And the answer is always, what are you going to do to take care of yourself? Like, how are you going to show up in a way that honors yourself and honors them, but sets a firm boundary to say, you may not enter into this space of my personal space with this energy because I'm not going to allow this into my space. And it's not something we do easily, especially when they're close family. That's the people that are closest to us can trigger us the most. So then we have to really figure out, how do we do that and give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves. And on this mental health focus, I think that's a key message, is that we're responsible for ourselves and we have the agency to take care of ourselves in whatever the way that looks like, and still be kind to others. So I put out kindness and candor, to say, I love you, but I can't let you talk to me this way, or I can't engage in this way because it's just not good for me. And it's probably not good for you either.
And I know you spoke to this a little bit, but this has really been a process for you.
Oh
And
yeah.
you have, to the point where now you're a entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because to me, you are, in terms of talent,
Mm-hmm.
you are a corporate star in my eyes.
Well, thank
You
you.
have all these
Oh
different
no.
abilities in the corporate world, but that wasn't what was bringing you fulfillment.
Right.
And
Right.
it's been a process for you to get to you,
Mm-hmm.
making you a priority, making
Mm-hmm.
your peace a
Mm-hmm.
priority.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you mentioned, you can suffer from anxiety
Mm-hmm.
and just the overwhelming of life.
Mm-hmm.
So speak to how you got here. I mean, I know that's a
Uh,
long story, but I mean, it's real. I mean, you are a real example of,
mm-hmm.
and I should say, you decided that you were going to do this. Although you're a responsible person when it comes to finances and everything, you really decided that you were going to do this in maybe about 3-4 months before
Mm-hmm.
before
Yep.
you actually resign. You were like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm sick of this."
So the context is, and yes, all that is absolutely true. The context is that I have always been a primary earner in our family. I've been a caregiver and a caretaker. I've been an older sister. There's all this, birth, what do they call it? Birth order that comes around. And the birth order tends to, characterize what the older sister is going to be in terms of personality traits, and in middle sister and younger sister and all that stuff. And I'd say sisters because I have only sisters. But that is, I'm a cookie cutter template for all that. So when people say, "Oh, you're so good at so many things," I'm like, "Yes, I am, and I do them all in one day." Because that's how I always live my life. When people would ask me to do something, I would say yes. I was a pleaser because the older sister and next to mom and all that, taking care of the little ones and different stuff. So as you go through life, you have all these things that are somewhat experiential. They come from the expectations that are placed on you from a very, very young age. And then you just keep trying to meet all those expectations. And women have it a little bit harder than men, I think, because we have all these, we at least in my generation, we grew up with many, many women as teachers. And then we had the maternal figure at home. So you just got all these women that you're trying to please in your life. And so you think in your mind, whether you know it consciously or not, that you are going to be very responsible and pleasing everybody as an adult because you're taught so many times that this is the way you're supposed to be. Be a good girl. And I've actually read a ton of books about how to break some of those patterns that we have templated in our society as what women are supposed to be, because we're trying to be superheroes. And so we came into the working world and started trying to have careers at the same time that we're trying to still keep up all the obligations at home, all the obligations with our parents and our siblings and friends and girlfriends and everything. And so we just have these expectations to do more, 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 more. And oh, by the way, still keep your figure and still get plenty of rest and still do all the things that you're supposed to do
Have
socially to
sex
keep up.
regularly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's just so much expectation on us. So I started to away from some of that when I was around 30 or 40. I mean, it took me a long time to really realize that this is not good for me. And I didn't even name myself as an introvert until I was probably 45. But the breaking away process from societal expectations was a very long and slow process. Then around 45, my mother-in-law moved in with us and life amped up because I had two younger children who were elementary school aged at that time. She was needing care. We were struggling to keep up financially because I hadn't worked my salary up well enough. And my husband did work, but he was, different jobs and different needs of our family. He would flex in and out as we needed for our family's needs. And so the challenge was, how do you still keep up with all this? Like the burdens just became so overwhelming that it was really just so much. And then add corporate onto that. Corporate never feels satisfied. There's always well, if we hit 6% growth this year, we're going to hit 8% next year. If we hit 8% next year, we're going to hit 10% the next year. We never feel satisfied. And so I was so much in conflict and personal conflict because I was trying to keep all the balls in the air as a working mom and as a caregiver, and I just couldn't do it. So we got to the point where I got to a breaking point. My health was not good. My blood pressure was up. My back was hurting. I was still trying to keep all these balls in the air. But as I was reading these books for women to say, you don't have to do it all, give yourself permission to stop. And it was a number of years that people told me, give yourself permission to rest and to play. You were one of them. You told me that. And finally, I just got to a point that I said, you know what? I'm not happy and I haven't been happy for a long time. And I deserve to be happy. If I can spend my whole life making other people happy, I should be in the mix. And I stopped and said to myself, what would make me happy? So I was on vacation last summer and I picked up this book by accident on my Kindle. It just, they say books you might enjoy, and it was one of them. And I thought, yeah, I'll give it a try. And it was just a perfect answer to how I would become an entrepreneur, which I've always wanted to do, but I never knew how. And then different events in my personal life conspired together that made the pressure amped up even more. And I just said, Uncle, I'm out. I give myself permission to put myself first. And the angels have supported me every inch of the way. When I made that choice to turn towards my joy, unexpected money came, unexpected support came. People have supported me in the ways that I couldn't even imagine, both verbally and in investing in me and in our business. And the success of the business has come in sales. And it's just like, wow, the minute I gave myself permission to turn towards joy, the vibration lifted and everything started to flow. And that's the message that I would share with others who are struggling like this, because so many women are in overwhelm because of just the way that society is that we can give ourselves permission to be in joy and to let life flow in a way that's going to be amplified and expansive and deliver all of our needs and still let us enjoy it. And so that's where I've been for the last few months. I wrote in my journal, this is a long story, but I'm almost finished. I wrote in my journal in October, I want to be out of corporate by March 1st. And I was talking to my husband on a walk one day, and I said, I just really want to go forward with this. I want to invest in this flight school for the business that I'm in, which is buying and selling land. And I want to get out. I want to just be in my own business, working my own path. And he said, well, don't quit your job, but get the flight school, go to the flight school, but don't quit your job. Don't quit your job. And then 1 month later, more things had happened and more things had piled up, and it just felt insurmountable. But the flight school piece was working and I was going forward. And I ended up giving my 3 month notice in November. And by March 1st, sure enough, my journal was true. I was out.
Wow. So wait a minute.
Yeah.
So, one, when you say flight school, do you mean
Uh-huh.
like airplane
No,
school?
no, no. It was a training. It was a training. They call it flight school because you take off so fast. I mean,
Yeah.
you're on the ground and you're learning how to do this business, and then suddenly you're just in a 4 month intensive, and you're taking off and running. But it is a tremendously good training program, and it just helped me to know how to do all the aspects of the business. And then I fell into it. It's just like I was born to this work, and I really just love it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And go back to the book.
Mhm.
What were you saying about the book? Did you say the name of the book and what it was?
I didn't, because this isn't a mental health topic. It's a that's an entrepreneur topic. But
Well,
the
come
book
on.
is called Dirt Rich, and
The
it's by
rich.
Mark Podolsky, and he has a program about how do you buy and sell undeveloped land around the country, and make a living at it. And it creates a space. Like, I wasn't sure at first if it would be great for me, because I don't want it just to be about the money. But I really enjoy talking to the people, which is surprising for an introvert. But I talk to them one by one, and I talk to people who want to sell their land and they don't know how. And I talk to people who want to buy land, and they're just so excited to have a piece of land that they call their own. And so the stories that I've heard from that are so powerful, and it just feels so in flow to be part of making those dreams happen. So it's been
And
fun.
people, I know, listen, this is all tied together because owning a piece of land is mental health.
Uh-huh.
It is
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So
Because yeah.
people can buy a piece of land or they could rent a piece of land or lease as well, right?
I do it on purchase plans. So I just charge $100 a month, literally, for the piece of land, sometimes, or 200 or 300, depending on, the property. But what I love about it is that, rents are so high now, as you know. It's just, we've talked about this a number of times, how a lot of cities are, they're tearing down low rent housing to build high rent housing, and it's displacing people, and it's just sickening in some ways, because we're we're exercising people out of society, and there's just such a hunger to just get out and not feel so trapped by everything that is in, the expectations of how we live. So I just love that for $100 a month, somebody can go get an RV and stick it on the land, and they've got a
Right.
place to live. I mean,
Right.
that's just so powerful and empowering. I
Yes.
really am
Yes.
glad to be a part of that.
I love it. I love that. Excuse me. I love that you're one of a few women that I know. I want to say maybe four, maybe three or four who are able to do that this year, way before
Mhm.
traditional age of retirement, are just
Mhm.
like, you know what, worked really hard for so many years and able to just say, I'm moving on to something else. I want to do
Mhm.
something else. And I
Mhm.
think that's very exciting. And what's important, whether or not you can retire or not,
Mhm.
what's important is tapping into your joy,
Yeah.
what
Yes.
makes you happy.
Because the things that I get to do now, I get to start my day with meditation. I get to do yoga several times a week. I get to lift weights several times a week. I get to take a walk in the middle of the day at whatever time works for me for an hour, hour and a half, and then come back and shower and work some more. The day flows. If my child comes home early from school or from college, I get to stop and visit with them for a few hours, or take the day off and go visit a sick relative. I mean, those things, they are part of the flow of life that's so important. But if I was in corporate, I can't even think about how many days I would have had to take off to support the needs of our life in the last 3 months.
Yeah,
And still I'm working plenty of hours, and we have lots of success. So, that's part of what I see as the dismantling of the patriarchy, is that life needs to flow better. And we need to trust people to show up and do the work in a way that shows ownership and still allows them to manage the needs of their family and their lives.
absolutely.
And we're getting sicker and sicker, being in this template that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, it's amazing what we have created, this thing that
Mhm.
we've created, this template. I think that's a really great word.
Mhm.
Although we are dismantling it somewhat, but it's something how we've created this lifestyle off of getting, getting, getting.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think that I'm materialistic. I'm not crazy materialistic, but definitely there's a materialistic part of me because things can bring me comfort. I can be sentimental, around different things. And what I'm realizing the older I get is the less that I need.
I was going to say, you and I are in direct contrast there. I need so little stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm realizing that,
Yeah.
how do I unload and but there's still things that I want,
Hmm.
so but I think that the older I get, the less of a priority it is on things.
Hmm.
Yeah. I like comfort though.
Yeah.
Eh, comfort is very important.
Yeah. I like a good bed. If I have a good bed, I'm good.
Yes, I like cozy comfort. But I
Yeah.
want to say before we end, and I really love this conversation,
Yeah.
is one thing about spirituality for me, and I don't know that I'm successful at this, but I think that it's important that when somebody is in their bag of sadness, that we don't get in that bag with that person, or we
Hmm.
don't say to them, that's how I see you.
Hmm.
And I think about when I think about that, I think about how years ago, I mean like 20 years ago, I had this boyfriend and he was aware, he knew me really well. He was aware that sometimes I could be depressed, and that's how
Hmm.
I would identify it. And then when we had broken up, but we would still talk, and he would say, "Well, how are you with your depression?" And I would be a little startled when he would say that. And then,
Hmm.
but I mean, he was only saying it because he cared. And then later on, he'd be like, "Well, how's your depression?" So for him, I had this thing on me, whereas I
Hmm.
wasn't seeing a label of depression on me, even though I know that this is something that I would struggle with, that I would now say is profound sadness.
Hmm.
I say that for the sake of what I've read, how depression can be. I can't get up for days, you know? So I think that it's important to not put a label on someone. And
Hmm.
I've definitely been guilty of this. So I've definitely been guilty of this. But I think when we're talking to a person, to uh, not get in that and let them know that we see something else.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well, we're all light. And that's what, I know I've told you this a number of times and you tell me, but I just, whenever somebody's struggling like that, I just say, I hold you in light. I see you in light, because depression is a state of mind, and it's an illusion. It's an illusion that you are not loved, you're not lovable, you're not able to engage in life. But all those are illusion. And I'm going to let you speak to the Course in Miracles statement, but I'm just going to say, only love is real. And so if we understand love and light as the only thing that is real here, and everything else on this earth school that we're in is part of our learning experience, but it's not who we are, then we hold people in light when they need us to do that, and wait for them to have a shift of perspective and come back to that.
Yes. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't, and that can be really hard. I've experienced that with
Hmm.
family members.
Hmm.
But if it's not love, it's a call for love.
Hmm.
And you have to one thing that I want to say, I keep thinking that you have met Craig, my
I know,
boyfriend.
how is that possible that we haven't met?
I don't know how you have not met him yet. But when we were first getting to know each other in the very early weeks, and he said something that will just like always stay on my heart, because he's been through a lot and I've been through a lot. And he said to me, and when I say a lot, I mean loss
Hmm.
of,
Hmm.
people passing away. And he said, "You want to live, like what I see in you is you want to live."
Mm.
And I that really touched me, because that's true. Because as much as I've been through, let's just say since 2020, as down as I have gotten,
Hmm.
I would relate to the people who are gone in my life and say,
Hmm.
well, I understand how they gave up, even though I'm not giving up, I understand how they felt, how
Mm-hmm.
low they were. I started to really understand so
Mm-hmm.
much that I would battle with them about.
Mm-hmm.
And, but there is, this desire in me to live. And so to me, we have to make that decision. And even if we don't know how we're going to get from, one step to the next step or one place to the next place, we
Mm-hmm.
have to make that decision or tap into that or say, I want to live,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so that we can get there. And
Yeah.
it's a process. But if we don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to get there
Mm-hmm.
from my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Your life force can get very small if you have depression taking over and you don't want to live.
I love you so much. And before we go, as I mentioned, you're a Reiki healer and you mentioned your business. And so, is there anything that you would like to share about your practice and your business and how people can get in touch with you, maybe through social media? I know you're an introvert, so you don't want to
Yeah,
be
I'm an introvert.
around,
I'm
but
not putting myself out there like
you
that.
you are a
Um,
person with a certain set of skills. So,
so I love to talk to people who are looking for a shift. And so I'm very happy for people to call me. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. If you look at LinkedIn, look at Stephanie Dean Clorox. If you look at Facebook, look at friend of Adrian Clorox, it's Stephanie Dean, friend of Adrian, because you know way more people than I do. But yeah, land is. I'm not buying land in Atlanta, so it's not something that local people would be able to necessarily know. I buy land in right now in Arkansas, Colorado, and Arizona, and it's very small parcels, or sometimes not so small, acre or 3 acres. And I do practice Reiki, and I don't really practice publicly that much. But I also do angel readings, and I'll be happy to talk with people who are struggling and just, help them to sort through their problems. And it's not in a professional counseling way, just a way of offering love and a listening ear sometimes. So,
right. And
uh,
that your Reiki and your angel readings speak to the intuitive gifts that you have. Although you're,
mhm,
Reiki, obviously you're a practitioner of that. And then
mhm,
the angel readings, you're using cards usually,
mhm, mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, but certainly your intuitive gifts
What
are
I
in.
would really love to end with is a statement that we talked about just breathe earlier. And this morning I drew a card when I was meditating with the angels, and the card said, share a breath. And there's an exercise that I do when I'm meditating on behalf of someone, like I'm praying for them, or I'm trying to just, connect with them and understand how I can offer some new insight or have a shift of perspective or just hold light for them. And so I breathe. And so I basically sit tall and I'll say, where's my breath? How does my breath feel? So I'm breathing in all the way up from the bottom of my toes to the top of my head, and just feel that energy. And if it's really clear without a lot of then I know that I'm feeling blank. I'm feeling like I could be a vessel. And so I take that in like this, and I didn't have any give. When someone is really depressed, their life force shrinks. And I'm just going to imagine when I've had a conversation with somebody who had that really low life force, and I imagine this, and I'm going to share a breath with them. So I'm going to say, what is that person experiencing now in their life force? And the life force is like a straw that just closes up. So I'll demonstrate this. It goes like this. I'm just going to imagine it and have it come true. And there's no ability for air to even come in. And so when you feel that, you can share a breath with somebody. If you have a person who's struggling in their lives and they don't feel like they have much life force, you can literally breathe life for them and share a breath and prayer and let that life force come through you and just hold them in light and know that they can have that breath come back and their life force come back.
That's so beautiful. Um, I'm not going to say too much because Craig might not want me to, but we have had an exchange of life force. through breath,
Hmm.
which was his idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, it's like what you just said is we can do that for someone else, just like
Mm-hmm.
we might pray for someone else. We can
Mm-hmm.
have a life,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we can also have an exchange of breath
Mm-hmm.
with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
This is some deep stuff.
This is some deep stuff. I've never told I've told just a couple people about that straw thing, but I've used it quite a lot. And I'm so amazed at the ability to connect with somebody virtually and have it really help, offer some love and compassion and healing
Yeah.
and divine intervention. Honestly, that's what it has to be.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I don't want you to go away after we say goodbye, our official goodbye. But thank you so much. And we're going to be seeing each other more virtually through podcast.
If you're struggling with mental health, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and give yourself permission to turn towards your joy because you're not trapped. We're never trapped. We can always take a breath and turn towards something different.
1000%. Amen. Thank you.